The last week has proven beyond the shadow of a doubt the national media actually hates Ole Miss. I'll explain why.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast out there. I'm your host, Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member as well. On today's show, we're going to break down Week 10 in the SEC of leans and locks that we're looking at from the early SEC lines from FanDuel. Then we'll talk about why this Ole Miss team is not just better than last season, talented group offensively, but undeniably, it is one of the more complete teams in college football right now. We'll explain that as well. And finally, we'll tackle the real takeaway from the last 2 weeks. The national media simply does not want Ole Miss to become a dominant brand. They'll do whatever it takes to hold that narrative back. We will tell you exactly why that is and why that might be changing soon. All of this and more on today's Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Remember, we're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So if there's anything the last week and a half or so has taught you as an Ole Miss fan, it is that the national media hates Ole Miss. They hate Ole Miss and what it stands for. They hate what happened 50 years ago. They hate all of that stuff, and they need Ole Miss to go back to being little Ole Miss and knowing their role and knowing their place. When the Florida job came open, you heard all the talking heads. They were all talking about, oh my gosh, Lane Kiffin would crawl on broken glass to take that job. This job is so much better. They have a much higher ceiling than Ole Miss. You heard Brandon Olson from Locked On Gators say that, I don't know if he can win a national championship at Florida, but I know he will never win one at Ole Miss. He said that on the SEC Squad show a couple of weeks back. Everybody is saying that if Lane Kiffin wants to make something, he has to leave. And then after Ole Miss takes care of business and looks like they're going to make the playoffs, and if Lane Kiffin makes the playoffs, Lane Kiffin isn't going anywhere. That's a logical thing. You're not going to wait until January to hire a coach, because if it goes sideways, if it goes south, all of a sudden you have messed up for the next 2 years of your coaching existence. You're not going to pay $15 million for a coach in January. It's not going to happen. And honestly, if we're going to be real about it, if for some reason Ole Miss does not make the playoffs, you're not going to pay $15 million for a coach that did that 2 years in a row. There's so many logical reasons why Lane Kiffin isn't going anywhere, but that doesn't change the national narrative, the national media machine from trying to push that. You've heard that from Andy Staples to Pete Thamel to anybody that has a microphone in front of them, why the Ole Miss job isn't as good as job X. And Lane Kiffin obviously wants to go to job X. Listen, I'm not going to say that Lane Kiffin is going to stay at Ole Miss for 20 years. That's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to say that they don't know that Lane Kiffin is interested in any job right now. They're only making assumptions because of what they need. And what they need is 12 programs that they can count on every single year to be good, because they simply don't have the time when it's 30 programs, when it's 40 programs. The age of the NIL and the age of the transfer portal has made it to where the lazy sports reporter all of a sudden has to do a little bit more work, and they hate that. It makes sense. Time is the one thing that is a precious commodity. Because what NIL did, what the transfer portal did, was make it to where, hey, you can't be as good of a husband. You can't be as good of a father. You can't be all of that and up to speed on all of these schools. Because of the amount of time that is required to do this, you're going to be a worse father or a worse husband, and all of that's going to strain your relationship. So they are desperately trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube to where you're just talking about Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, all of these name brands that you think of, because it's fine if they're good. They don't want a situation where in the top 10 is Indiana at number 2, Georgia Tech at number 7, Ole Miss at number 8, Vanderbilt at number 10. They do not want that. They do not want anything other than those schools every now and then being cute, popping up. It's like, man, they're good at football this year. That's pretty great. They do not want a change in the hierarchy. So when a job that fits their criteria comes open, they're going to take that opportunity to move whatever coach and sabotage whatever's going on in the program at the deemed inferior program to get them to move on to the next level. Now at this weekend, after Ole Miss won, there was a little bit of a tonal shift of everybody's like, yeah, you could do everything at Ole Miss, and Ole Miss is going to go to the playoff. Doesn't look like he's going to go to Florida. And that happened pretty quick over the weekend after the win. Immediately after that, Brian Kelly laid an egg against Texas A&M. And then they started up the same people. Well, he might say no to Florida, but he wouldn't say no to LSU. Literally, that's on X. That happened. They're talking about that. There's just a certain program that you can't say no to. Never mind the fact that he has no ties to Louisiana State University. All they can do is offer him a ton of money, which he has said over and over again he's not that interested in. And Ole Miss is about to make him paid somewhere in the $13 million range. So money is not a problem where he is. They're making assumptions, making guesses. They're wish casting Lane Kiffin out of there so Ole Miss can go back to being their cute little self, to where they occasionally pop up and have an Eli Manning season in the Cotton Bowl. They occasionally pop up and go to the Sugar Bowl and beat Alabama. That is super neat. This Ole Miss team, they want it to go back to where it was, where it spent the better part of the last 50 years. The problem is, doesn't look like that's going to happen, because for Florida or any other school, in my opinion, okay, and this is just in my opinion, for them to hire Lane Kiffin away, that's going to require Ole Miss to lose 2 of their last 4 games as a 10-point favorite. And it's going to require about $15 million. Because remember, he's likely going to get paid about 13.5, 14 at Ole Miss, likely if he chooses to stay. So it's going to take about 15, because the way it sits right now, he has complete autonomy at Ole Miss and he can do whatever he wants to do. That would not be the case at any other job in the country. The national media wish casting, they discount that. They discount happiness. They discount family. All they care about is money and what the brand and uniform says. They want LSU. They want Florida. They want those schools to be big, because college football in their eyes is normal when it is. The problem is Ole Miss is a better program than both of those schools right now. And you're going to say, but they both won national championships since Ole Miss. Yeah, they have. Absolutely. But since NIL and the transfer portal, Ole Miss has a better record than both of them. Ole Miss has won 10 games, 3 out of the last 4 years, and they're likely going to do it again. So that'll be 4 out of 5. Ole Miss has to lose 2 of their last 4 games as a double-digit favorite to screw up the playoffs this year. The national media does not want that to stand. They can't allow that to stand. They need Ole Miss back where they view them belonging. And I don't think that's something that can happen. I don't think that toothpaste can go back in the tube. And as long as Lane Kiffin stays at Ole Miss, which, remember, at LSU and Florida, he's just trying to build what he's already built at Ole Miss. At Ole Miss, you can do absolutely everything moving forward. If you win the last 4 games this season, you're probably going to play in Atlanta. If not, you're going to be hosting a playoff game. Absolutely. And you're in the tournament for all the marbles. And it's going to determine where you end up. And that's exactly what Lane Kiffin wants. And that is the one thing that Lane Kiffin would leave for if he did not think that could happen at Ole Miss. So that would require, for it not to happen, 2 losses in their last 4 games. So you have to take an Ole Miss versus everybody attitude. the rest of this way. Take it to heart how much everybody doesn't believe in you. Take it to heart how much everybody wants you to fail. Take it to heart exactly how much everybody thinks you can't do this. Against South Carolina, lock in. Against the Citadel, lock in. Against Florida, oh yeah, lock in. Against Mississippi State, lock in. Win the last 4 games. Go 11-1. Make history. Lane Kiffin himself, his favorite recruiting pitch that he tells recruit is, why go to this place where something's been done before instead of going someplace that it never has? And you be the legacy that everybody tries to chase. Lane Kiffin has a chance to live that. And the national media knows that, and that scares the heck out of them. So Ole Miss is going to be fine. They're going to be fine, regardless. You publicly say that it's a $14 million offer or something out to Lane Kiffin. You make sure that gets known. It doesn't matter if he goes or not. You're going to be able to hire whoever you want to nationally for that much money. But if Lane Kiffin wants to stay, and he chooses to, which I think he will, you have everything in place for him to win and win next year, win big in this age of NIL, become a constant, if you will, in college football. So we'll see exactly how that goes. Anyway, this Ole Miss offense is miles ahead of last season. And all of this is without Jackson Dart or Trey Harris leading the way. The question is, why? The answer has a lot to do with how Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss Jr. is structuring this unit's rhythm and balance. The play calling has matured. The tempo control is sharper. They actually slowed the ball down against Oklahoma, had 35 minutes of time of possession, and the personnel groupings are becoming a little bit more unpredictable because of the talent that has filled out the roster. The result is a smoother, more efficient system that gets playmakers in space, all without needing that one superstar to carry the load. We'll tell you exactly how this offense evolved and what's driving its success, what it means next for the Rebels ceiling this season, and that's all coming up next. College football is back, and I could not be much more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets, they can kind of feel more like a battle than the game itself. The endless queues, hidden fees, and prices jumping at checkout. That is why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices, all with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. I pulled up Game Time, and in just a couple of taps, I saw amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite college football games for as low as $25. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Do us a favor, like, subscribe, and comment on the video. Subscribe to the podcast on whichever audio podcast you're listening to and give it a 5-star review. It costs absolutely nothing, but it helps keep all of this free. Locked On is getting ready to change the game yet again, all in the name of having fun following your team. It is coming in December, and don't forget to check out a second listen on the network. Nearly every team, college or pro, is ready for you. We talked about this offense, and I mentioned it. Heck, it might have been on the pregame show. It might have been on the postgame show. If you look at the quarterback, they're like John Williams at Locked On Sooners, who does a fantastic job on that side, him and Jay Smith. They asked the question, is Trinidad Chambliss a better quarterback than Jackson Dart? And I was like, that's a nuanced question. The short answer is no, absolutely not. Trinidad Chambliss is not a first-round level quarterback. Jackson Dart absolutely was. But this offense is different. This offense does things in a certain way operationally that Ole Miss didn't do a year ago. And not to mention the fact that the running game is vastly improved this season. Kewan Lacey has been a revelation, especially in pass pro. And when you look at Trinidad Chambliss, the first thing you notice on the stat sheet is how many different people catch the ball. Trinidad Chambliss was a point guard in high school, all-state point guard in Michigan. And because he's a point guard, you learn how to distribute. You learn how to find the open man. You learn how to have vision of what's going on. And a perfect example of that was the little trick play kind of that they ran to Trace Bruckler at the end of the game that kind of put it away. That ended up being Trace's only catch that led to a touchdown. That was his completion to his 8th wide receiver on the day. Winston Watkins had 4. Harrison Wallace had 5. Caden Lee, 3. Deshaun Stribling, 3. Kewan Lacey, 2. Deuce Alexander, 3. Daquan Wright, 3. You get the idea. All of the receivers are pretty evenly distributed. And this is honestly the definition of Mike Leach, RIP, his definition of balance and offense. How many of these stars are getting touches? Ole Miss against Oklahoma. This is the really cool part. As good as they were as a defensive team, and Oklahoma is an elite defensive unit. I'm not talking about statistics. I'm talking about eye test. They can absolutely flow to the football, and they are absolutely aggressive. But Ole Miss had 41 runs over the course of the game. That was nearly a 50-50 split. Ole Miss had 87 plays in the game, 46 passes in the course of the day. Trinidad Chambliss was 24 of 44 for 315 yards and a touchdown, 90 QBR against a defense that statistically, at least statistically, and we always talked about how this was a magnitude of 2 or 3 the best offense that Oklahoma has played. But when you look at that, Ole Miss kind of took them apart about as well as you can expect to do it. I am curious to see how they do against the Tennessee Volunteers on Saturday night. Ole Miss ended up winning the game 34-26 after a weird third quarter to where Oklahoma scored 16 points and actually took the lead in that ball game. Ole Miss scored the final 9 points of that game and ended up winning it. I like this Ole Miss team. I like the toughness that they play with, the way they spread the ball around, the way that Trinidad Chambliss kind of does the athletic game manager thing as a quarterback. He is good at distributing. He's good at running. He really makes it to where the defense has to struggle dealing with him. He doesn't get sacked very often. Oklahoma, which leads the country in sacks, only got there 1 time on the day. This is with as aggressive as they play. All of that. Ole Miss is one of the top lines in the country in pressure rate allowed, and it showed. This offensive line has turned into a strength of this team. It's kind of weird after hearing everybody after the first game and after the second game, hearing to what this offensive line has become, hearing that you've just stopped talking about Patrick Kudus. Those guys, they figured out how to be really good players. And Trinidad Chambliss and the distributing and the way they call the game, it all flows better. Time of possession now all of a sudden is a thing that matters. They don't go for it as much. In fact, what started that 16-point run, it was a go for it on a 4th and 2 from inside your own territory, your 25-yard lines that got stopped. Ole Miss prevented a touchdown and held them to a field goal, but the momentum completely changed whenever that happened. I always talk about the biggest momentum jump in football is a 4th down stop. It's interesting. And if you look up over on the defensive side of the ball before we go over to lines in the next segment, Princewill and Umanmielen, 7 quarterback pressures against Oklahoma, 1.5 sacks, 2 tackles for loss. The younger Umanmielen had himself a day. William Echoles had himself a day. Cam Franklin had himself a day. This was the defensive line that we were promised. And I'm going to be honest about something. Everybody's going to talk about what Ole Miss did offensively, but Ole Miss was too bust that Oklahoma was a way that they were able to take advantage of at an extremely high level, just too bust away from completely blowing that game out, because Oklahoma, who had 320, 330 yards for the game, 130 of those came on 2 plays in the game. Other than that, it was 14 first downs and 200 yards. Ole Miss pretty well controlled this game. The scoreboard doesn't show it. Scoreboard absolutely doesn't show it. Ole Miss doesn't win games that way, apparently. But Ole Miss wins games. Now, Ole Miss is going to be favored by 10 plus in the rest of the games they are likely playing this season. Take care of South Carolina, and it gets really interesting because the next week is the Citadel, and then you have to win 1 game out of 2, and you're sitting in the college football playoff. And everything's happy, and all of your dreams are ready to come true. So I'm pretty excited about where that can end up. In our final segment, let's take an early look at this week's betting lines. We're driving into the leans and locks from our friends at FanDuel, breaking down which SEC matchups are worth a closer look and which early spreads might move as the week goes on. From potential trap games to statement opportunities, we've got you covered before the numbers settle in. All of that plus a few bold picks, maybe even of our own, coming up right after this. You know, the NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you've missed the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. You can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps the game, every game, very exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when you win that first $5 bet. So head to FanDuel.com, sign up, and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Kind of a shorter week on the schedule for the SEC this week. If you want to look at the lines that are going on, there's 6 games this weekend, including 2 ranked matchups. Ole Miss, for once, is not one of them, but Vanderbilt is at Texas, and that's number 9 Vanderbilt at like number 20 Texas. And Vandy, by the way, for those who don't know this, has a winning record all time against the Texas Longhorns. Vandy's ranked 9th. Texas is favored by 2.5. That means that it would basically be a pick 'em to 1 point favorite for Vandy on a neutral field. Vandy'd be favored by about 4 at home. This is a game that it all comes down to whether or not Arch Manning plays potentially. Arch had a better game against Mississippi State, but got a really bad concussion, it looked like, at the end of the game that required the backup quarterback to come in to throw the last pass. He did. Touchdown. Texas beat Mississippi State. Vanderbilt beat Missouri. But Texas being favored, that is interesting. If Arch Manning plays, which he might, Vanderbilt, this could be the type of game that just eats up the quarterback for Texas. Now, Georgia is favored by 7.5 points at the versus the Florida Gators in Jacksonville. The game is at 3:30 Eastern time on ABC. It's going to be a big matchup. That line is kind of small. That might be because of the defense that the Georgia Bulldogs has been putting on the field lately. We'll see exactly what it looks like. Can DJ Lagway use the new play caller that is in there now that Billy Napier is gone? Maybe they can make the Georgia Bulldogs suffer a little bit. I'm not 100% sure, but we'll see exactly what happens. Georgia's favored by a little bit over a touchdown. I kind of like Georgia in that game. Mississippi State is at Arkansas. Arkansas is favored by 4.5 points. The game is at 4 o'clock Eastern time on the SEC network. Listen, Mississippi State is finding new torturous ways to lose football games every single Saturday. And here's the thing. Arkansas does the same thing. Both of these schools, they don't know how to win. I have no idea which direction to go on this one. So I might just recommend take the points in this one. If they're going to offer you 4.5, take them, because this game could get absolutely weird if you look at the team's ability to win close games late. South Carolina is at Ole Miss. Ole Miss favored by 12.5 points. The game is at 7 p.m. Eastern time on ESPN. Ole Miss matches up pretty well against South Carolina. South Carolina is the last rated rushing team in the Southeastern Conference. They also have Lenore Sellers, who can get loose from time to time. And if you can be sticky at the back end of that defense, you can make it very hard for them to move the ball. I think this is a pretty good matchup, honestly, for the Ole Miss Rebels. So we'll see exactly how that goes. But I kind of like the Ole Miss minus 12.5 in this game, even with the Oklahoma win for Ole Miss this week. Remember, it's Ole Miss versus everyone. Ole Miss versus the world. There is no overlooking at this point. Win every single game because the national media is waiting to say, I told you so if you lose one. So South Carolina and Ole Miss, it's the first opportunity to do that. If you win that game, you kind of get rolling a little bit. Then you have the Citadel, Florida, bye week, Mississippi State. Kentucky is at Auburn. Auburn's favored by 9.5 points. Man, that's a lot of points. That's a lot of points for that Auburn offense. Now, Ashton Daniels kind of got them clicking a little bit. The game is at 7:30 on the SEC Network on Saturday. The game is on the Plains. It is a night game. Kentucky can be weird offensively, although they scored 35 points against Tennessee over the weekend, and Auburn beat Arkansas over the weekend. So maybe Auburn gets that win again, and they start to kind of get right on their way up to 6th. I talked with Luke Robinson on the Reaction Roundtable show, or maybe it was before it, and he talked about he grew up near Auburn, and what scares him a little bit is Alabama needing a win to make the playoffs or something like that, and Auburn needing a win for bowl eligibility, or Hugh Freeze keeping his job, or DJ Durkin, because we all know exactly what it's like to play in that stadium and how weird things can happen. So I'm curious to see this Kentucky game. If Auburn, is it possible that they overlook Kentucky? I'm not 100% sure. And also the last game on ABC is Oklahoma at Tennessee. Tennessee's favored by 3.5 points. Listen, John Mateer didn't look right. And Oklahoma didn't stick with their run enough to where they could make the run hurt. John Mateer can run the ball a little bit. He's going to be a little bit better. He just doesn't look right. He doesn't. You saw the Ole Miss game over the weekend. He doesn't look like his pre-Auburn self. Before then, he looked really good. Now, it's just iffy. Oklahoma is at Tennessee playing at night. It's hard to win in Neyland Stadium at nighttime. It's a great atmosphere there. I just don't think that Oklahoma can go on the road and get Tennessee. But I will say this. I need a 9-2 Tennessee versus Vanderbilt game at the end of the year, with the winner likely going to the playoffs, more than I need air. That game would be absolutely fantastic. It would be amazing. So we'll see exactly what that looks like. Anyway, thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we are the front door of Ole Miss. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. It helps the show and is totally free. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On's SEC. Chris Gordy breaks down the best conference in college sports, from the rivalries to the championship and every game in between. Find Locked On SEC on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hotty toddy, everybody. And remember, analytics is just the old English word that means bad football. We'll see you tomorrow.